welcome to this special meeting of the People Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'd like to inform those present that the meeting is being webcast live and will be capable of repeated viewing. Right, so procedural business, let me come to. Are there any substitutes today?
Sorry, Bernadette Kent, the Older People's Council, substituting for Sarah Fulford.
Okay, thank you, Bernadette. And no one else. And Councillor Gage, is she giving her apologies? Or is she just late? Okay. 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 So, any declarations of interest? I don't think anybody's got shares in these libraries, but obviously not. Right. Okay. So, we have no part 2 items today, Sarah. So, the press and public won't be excluded. Hello. Maureen. Right. Now, we have 3 deputations before us today. This may take slightly longer than the set 15 minutes, but I will allow this because this is obviously a very important issue to a lot of people. So, first we have a deputation regarding Rottingdean Library. So, Claire, could you please come up and present your deputation to the committee? And you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Our campaign has raised serious concerns about the process and approach for the proposals to close 3 Brighton Hove libraries. We believe the decision fails to meet the DCMS requirements, but in any case, we think the committee should ask serious questions about the way in which this has been pushed through Brighton Hove's decision-making process without proper engagement with councillors. Let me explain why. The decision to make cuts was made in the February budget meeting and preceded any public consideration of a range of alternatives. Although we've been advised by Brighton Hove officials that the decision not to look at any strategic alternatives was a council decision, there is no evidence this choice was ever put to a council meeting. Subsequently, when local residents have raised strategic alternatives for consideration, these have been rejected as they would take too long to implement. The analysis supporting the decision was misleading to the council, incomplete and skewed. It included references to the high costs of running the Rottingdean Grange as a factor in decision making, which were in fact not relevant to the cost of running the library. The plans talk about a needs and use analysis. In fact, this focused on economic deprivation and did not consider the very high usage of Rottingdean Library. Local needs have not been fully considered, and the impact on protected groups will not be adequately mitigated by the proposals. The proposal highlighted the proximity of schools to other libraries, but this was not done for Rottingdean, with its 2 primary schools and 2 nurseries whose children will use the library. The equality impact assessment showed very high impact on protected groups, including older people, without sufficient mitigation. It suggested that older residents could be served with increasing isolation in their own homes via electronic or delivery services, despite the fact that Brighton Hove intend to make cuts in these very services. Following a Freedom of Information request to Brighton Hove and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, their deadline for response has been extended by another month, while a public interest test is applied on revealing to us what was in their correspondence about this. It seems very concerning that it could be considered in the public interest to keep this secret. A short-term tactical decision to close will result in a permanent loss of this facility. In the light of the upcoming National Year of Reading, does this committee agree with the Labour Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport that closing libraries is cultural vandalism? We strongly urge the committee to reject this proposal as poorly and improperly made.
Thank you. We don't have questions, do we? No. Right, okay. Thank you very much indeed, Claire. Thank you. So, are we going to note the deputation? We're obviously going to have lots of questions about this fairly shortly, and we will be asking Alan Robbins and officers about it. But do we at least agree to note this at the moment? Oh, Councillor Shannon.
Sorry, yes, I'm happy to note, but I think there's some quite important questions that were asked there, so I don't want to lose those.
No, I know we don't.
So I hope they'll
write them down,
answered.
Sue.
Well, I think we've all heard them about the process and the issues, and they've also sent them in writing, and I'm sure Councillor Robinson and
I think
so. I think
we
good
all
to get
have
some
that.
replies to that.
Yeah, I think at the moment we're just going to go through these and then we're going to listen to Alan Robbins and the officers, and then we will ask lots of questions, Sue. Lots of questions, okay. So do we agree to note the deputation? Okay, so our next deputation is from Alicia Buckingham on Westdean Library. So please can you present your deputation to the committee, and you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'm here with fellow residents for Westdean to propose our closure of Westdean Library. I'm urging you all to do the same. The library is more than bricks and books. It is a vital and irreplaceable community hub, and closing it would be a serious loss to the children and residents who rely on it every day. The Council's report suggests that Patcham Library is an alternative to Westdean Library, but this is misleading. I would urge councillors to walk themselves from Westdean Library to Patcham Library and back. There is no direct bus route, and the journey involves steep hills and crossing London Road, a busy main road with unsafe crossings. For children, older people and those without cars, Patcham Library is effectively inaccessible. Even for drivers, replacing a 5-minute stop at Westdean after school with a 20-minute round trip is unrealistic and contradicts the Council's active travel and air pollution policies. Closing Westdean will deny easy access to books and social connection, and the Council needs to be honest about this. Many residents rely on the library for digital access, printing and face-to-face support, yet library staff are already only available 1 day a week. Closing it entirely would deepen isolation. The Council has said that reducing or consolidating libraries and investing in digital services will help address digital exclusion, but this closure appears to be short-sighted cost-cutting, not a reinvestment plan. Apologies if we've missed it, but is there a strategy showing how the harm from this and other library closures will be addressed for alternative initiatives, specifically in our community? Westdean has had no council-managed events for over 2 years, while other Brighton libraries continue to host them regularly. This isn't due to lack of community interest. We run book clubs and social events, yet the council has offered no support since December 23. To the cynical, this could be viewed as part of a managed decline or even a strategic neglect. We have submitted separately a summary of events at Westdean since June 23 compared with other Brighton libraries. We request an explanation for this disparity. We do not support the Council's proposal for any so-called community model or volunteer-run alternative for the library. Our experience with the barn at Westdean, a volunteer-run community space held where people can hire, shows how stressful and unsustainable such arrangements are. Community libraries face significant costs and would require a full-time rota of volunteers. We should not be expected to run or pay for our library. We urge the Council to recognise the challenges of a community-run option, respect residents' wishes, and keep Westdean in the library network. The existing Council assessment compares libraries across wards using metrics like borrowing numbers, footfall and free school meals, yet it is silent on the harm closing Westdean Library will cause. We find it unacceptable that the report assumes Brighton's increasingly expensive public transport network is a mitigating factor. As I mentioned earlier, this network does not join Westdean and Patcham. The library is co-located with Westdean Primary School, which has 476 pupils. The school has unique direct access to the library for its own entrance, created when the library was downsized previously, and it's become increasingly reliant on library resources. Has the school's separate access been captured in your figures? Has the Council evaluated the impact on pupils, and are there plans to support and replace library resources? The Council has a statutory duty under Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964 to provide a comprehensive and efficient library service. Closing Westing without first demonstrating that reasonable alternatives exist risks breaching this duty. The proposed saving of just £20,000 is less than half a percentage of the overall library budget, yet the social, education and community cost of closure will be significant. Libraries are vital to literacy and learning, with new reading tests at age 13 and initiatives like the Libraries Improvement Fund and the 2026 National Year of Reading. There is a strong policy support for school-linked libraries like Westing. Closing it now would go against national policy. We understand the Council's financial pressures. However, given the Council's obligations, the minimal savings and the library's social and educational value, how can closure be justified without exploring all reasonable alternatives? We fear this might be a done deal, but we don't believe any councillor entered public life to close libraries. Libraries aren't luxuries, they're lifelines, and no decision on the closure should proceed until the needs and use analysis recognise that patching is not a realistic alternative. The Council publishes an assessment of the long-term harm of closing Westing versus small short-term savings. You recognise the practical obstacles to community-managed alternatives, and the impact on Westing pupil library access and the school's resource provision is fully evaluated. 12 residents have asked us to submit their statements expressing personal impact this closure would have. Many more wanted to speak, and we submitted their statements separately to ensure our community continues to be heard. Please do not make Westing Library another statistic.
Thank you very much. Well done for being bang on time. Well done. Okay. So, again, we'll vote to note, but I know you've all got lots of questions. Don't worry, I'm very happy to listen to the questions. Shall we note this deputation? Okay. So thank you very much indeed, Alicia, for taking the time to bring this deputation on the potential closure of Westing Library to us. As mentioned previously, no decision has been made regarding the proposals that have gone out for consultation. The decision is going to be made at December's Cabinet meeting on the 11th of December. So today's committee provides the opportunity for members of the committee to make comments which will be considered during that decision-making process. We can actually make more than comments, we can actually make recommendations. And we will be considering the points you have raised during the discussion. So thank you very much. So I now go to our last deputation, which is from David Powell. And again, this is on Westing Library. So David, would you like to please come forward and present your deputation? And you also have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Westing Library is more than a building full of books to me and my family. I lived and grew up in Westing with my sister and parents. My grandparents lived right next to the library, and I went there often through the 1970s. I remember it as a lovely, warm, bright space full of interesting books, which we didn't have at home. My mother often read to me and my sister there, and we usually borrowed a few children's books. I remember using encyclopedias and reference books there to do homework. Later on, going to Hove Library too. I learned how to find resources and that asking the librarians is always helpful. Nearly 20 years ago, I returned to Westing to live with my wife and growing family. Our 3 children went to the school and we used the library all through those years, our youngest only leaving last year. They all loved going there, either after school or at other times to be read to and to borrow new books. They were also regularly taken into the library through the school connection with classmates by their teachers. Having so much choice in a non-commercial space is an almost unique experience in today's world. They loved the process of selecting books, taking them up to the counter and engaging with the librarians. Of course, reading the books at home and then going back to return them and borrow more. There were 2 librarians there 3 days a week then, and we valued them, their help and suggestions for new books to try. Many parents of younger children are probably unaware that the library was a lot bigger before. Unfortunately, the experience of going to the library was not the same for us after the school took over more than half the space for an extra classroom and the librarian's staffed hours were cut severely. For the last few years, although the public have had access via the library's extra door entry system, this is a pale imitation of the warm, welcoming place I remember. This was not how the library was designed to be, and it is now darker due to the partition wall blocking off the southeast-facing large windows. Once West Dean children leave primary school, unfortunately, under the library's extra service, they're effectively barred from using the library independently until they're 16, unless they want to go with their parents, who have a membership card. Most teenagers don't want to do this. I wonder why this effect was not anticipated by those cutting the librarian staff days. At Patcham Library at 3 o'clock, there are always some high school children who come into the library straight after school. That has not been possible apart from 1 day a week at West Dean. With our children, it's been difficult to sensibly guide them and help them to manage their screen and smartphone usage over the last few years. Doesn't it seem inconsistent that a council claiming to support parents and local authority schools to reduce the usage of smartphones for young children would be considering closing a very cheap-to-run local library? It's not surprising that the library has become less attractive and less used as a result of these changes. It looks to us like a kind of managed decline. I found the presentation of the usage statistics of the various libraries in the council's justification document to be unfair and disingenuous cherry-picking. Jubilee and Hove libraries at the top of the table, with West Dean and Hollingbury at the bottom. Of course, a huge amount of the overall library's budget is spent on these two central libraries, while West Dean has had virtually no investment, a relatively tiny number of books, and is staffed by one librarian for 1 day a week. The way the figures for library service per head of population in other councils around the country are presented as justification for the closure of 3 of our local libraries is that we should be happy to reduce our local library services to move down towards the average in the country. We completely reject this kind of defeatist argument. Surely the counter to the point being made by the council must be that we should try to preserve the advantage that we may have, not to simply let it go. I've spoken to many local people since attending the consultation meeting at the school a few weeks ago. There is overwhelming opposition to the proposed closure in the West Dean community. I've also spoken to teaching staff at the school and understand that since they moved back to a 2-form entry, they will no longer be part of the building which the library lost when the school expanded. Reduction in the size of the library space, the loss of librarians, and almost complete lack of activities has been extremely detrimental to the service experience of the library's users. This has had very predictable outcomes, and we find ourselves here.
You are going to have to finish.
I propose that the council should expand the library into the full space soon to be available, relaunching this highly valued, underfunded resource and maximising the benefits it could deliver. With the council retaining ownership of the library, the community and school would support it to flourish.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you very much indeed, David, for presenting your deputation to the committee. Your thoughts have been heard by committee members and our cabinet member responsible for libraries, and so will be taken into consideration both this evening as we question Councillor Robbins and officers, and going forward as cabinet colleagues deliberate ahead of making their final decision at Cabinet on the 11th of December. Do members agree to note the deputation concerning Rottingdean? It's not Rottingdean, it's West Dean Library. Thank you. Okay, so we now go to, there are no member questions, but it's just chair of comms. So today we're here for this special meeting to discuss the important issue of possible changes to the library service in the city. As we have heard from the deputation, this is an emotive issue with strong feelings from the communities who may be affected if the changes consulted on were to go ahead. And I think I speak for everyone here. As an ex-teacher myself, and I know that other people have been involved in education here and so on, of how enormously important reading is to young people in particular, and what a wonderful joy it is as you go through life. It is your great friend. And I remember persuading students who were about to put in for university to read more books, because you found out that actually, even though they were doing English A-level, they were only reading the set text. So really, reading is very important, and I think we all agree with that, which is why there are strong feelings here. So, as members, we will have seen from the report, no decision has yet been made, and that is not what we are being asked to scrutinise this evening. Nonetheless, there is plenty of information in the report for us to scrutinise about the consultation, about the process of it, and so on. And this meeting gives us an excellent opportunity to look at this issue again. And as set out in the recommendations of the report in 2.4, to make comments and recommendations which will be considered in the development of the final recommendations to Cabinet in December. So I think this is one where we can actually make some input, which I know a number of you wish to do. And indeed, that is the purpose of scrutiny. So we now come to the substantial item on the agenda. Presenting the report to us are Councillor Alan Robbins and Cabinet Member for Sport, Recreation and Library, Anne Gianfrancesco, Director of Commissioning and Communities, and Cerise Howard, Head of Library Services. Okay. So we have both Cerise and Anna at the table with Councillor Robbins.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. What I'll do is, I'm sure you've all seen the slides or seen the accompanying things, but I'll just very quickly run through them again. I promise I won't take 2 hours. I'll probably take 10 minutes, and we'll just then be open to all sorts of questions and probing. So thank you all for the deputations. I think the people have already gone upstairs, and we recognise the impact of the proposals on communities and customers of the library service. The purpose of this scrutiny committee is to provide reassurance that the process of the council has followed when considering proposals to change the library service. Full details will be shared with Cabinet in the report and appendix, including full text and all consultation responses. If scrutiny committee have specific comments or proposals and consultation responses, those comments will be taken into account by Cabinet when it makes its decision alongside all other information which has been put to it. So if we could have slide number 2, please. Slide number 2 is up there, good. And this is the, I think we've missed a slide. Can we go back one slide? Can we go back to slide, this is slide 3?
Yeah, this is slide 2.
So we go back to slide 2?
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the one.
Proposals. Yeah. To achieve savings through reduction of revenue budget for staff and running costs through a reduction of evening and weekend opening hours at Jubilee, I see you, for Jubilee and Hove Library, and the closure of up to 3 libraries proposed, Hollandbury, Rottingdean and Westdean. So if you have slide 3, sorry, I'm confusing you and I don't mean to. So the process is a February budget, council decision to reduce public library service to achieve savings. In March, the People, Overview and Scrutiny Committee sat. In July, the Cabinet decision to begin the public consultation from the 18th of July to the 10th of October, 12 weeks, the public consultation period. And where we are now is November, the People and Overview Scrutiny Committee. And December will give us the final Cabinet decision. January, staff consultation if required, reduction of up to 5 FTEs. And April, any potential changes to public library provision will be implemented. So if we can move to the next slide. There was a high level of engagement at the consultation process, which was advertised through the social media posts, press releases and posters in libraries and other council buildings. Stakeholders, schools, community groups were emailed directly to encourage engagement. And we have there, I'm not sure that I've not missed another thing. I'm sorry about this.
No, you're on the right one.
I'm on the right one, yeah. So there was 200, oh yes, I see it's up in the corner there, yeah. 2,711 consultation survey responses, 164 emails sent to the consultation inbox, 374 people attended 9 public meetings. Most respondents used Jubilee Library, 71%, and Hove Library, 38%, with a lower number of community libraries. Most respondents using the online Your Voice survey, but 1% were filled in on paper. Most of the email respondents were related to Rottingdean and Westdean libraries and included statements from local community groups, Rottingdean Parish Council and Westdean School. Rottingdean and Westdean public meetings were the busiest, and Hollinbury and online meetings were the least busy. We actually done one meeting where we had one person, but that was the exception rather than the rule. So slide 5, please. And here we have some key themes here were expressed through the consultation. Most respondents did not agree with the proposals to reduce opening hours or closure of libraries. There was general opposition to any reduction in library budgets. Concerns about the loss of vital community resource, free community space, difficult travelling to alternatives, particularly for families and the elderly and disabled, digital and financial exclusion. So if we could have slide 6 now, please. So here we have the key themes. Again, impact to low-income families in Hollinbury. Hove, impact on families, students and full-time workers. Jubilee, concerns for vulnerable groups, loss of study space for students. Rottingdean, impact on children at neighbouring schools and impact on older people. Lack of alternative community space in the area. Westdean, impact on Westdean school children, impact on older people, lack of alternative community space in the area. And we note the strength of feeling expressed through the consultation about Rottingdean, Westdean and Jubilee libraries. This will be reflected in the report to Cabinet. Slide 7, please. We asked residents and stakeholders to share ideas for alternative ways to make savings and deliver service within the reduction budget. These ideas will all be reported to the Cabinet. Reduction in saving targets for libraries and relocation of other council services. Increase use of volunteers or community-run models. Seek alternative funding. Reduce or after hours at larger libraries to maintain smaller branches and protect evenings and weekends. Alter existing library services, including extended libraries extra. And then if we have slide 8, which I believe is the last one, this just lays out a timeline of where we are now, which I believe we've already run through. So just very briefly again saying October to November was will be the review. December, the final Cabinet decision, it's the Cabinet which will have to consider all the information available to determine what changes, if any, they make to specific libraries, while ensuring the Council continue to meet their statutory obligation. In January, staff consultation, and in April, any potential changes to the library service will be implemented. So that's a quick whistle-stop through the slides, which, as I say, I know you've probably all been through anyway. So I suppose now what we do, Jackie, Councillor O'Quinn, is just to move straight on to questions and comments.
Yep, thank you very much. Alan, it's fine. We used names today, I think. I know I've got Bridget online and I've got Sam, and I'm sure I'm going to have lots of others. Sorry, can you shout out your name? Jasmine. Okay, Jasmine. Right, what's going on now? And then, who else down here? Was it you? Ivan. And was it you? It's Bernadette, isn't it? You were there. Any more on this side? Yes. TJ, Maureen. Councillor Mackie? Or Julie? Questions? No? Okay, so that's what we're going on with. I just thought I'd make one small point, because it kind of illustrated the problem with digital. Because you said, Alan, that at one of the meetings, I think it was for Hollingbury, only one person went. I think it's very interesting that in certain areas of the city, you get a very high attendance on those online meetings, and in other areas, it's very, very low. So that kind of illustrates that point about digital inclusion. And, I can remember with the school admissions, there were a lot of people online, but that was a certain area of the city, it was the centre of the city, where I would argue that people were more sophisticated in their use of computers, etc., etc. But anyway, I'm now going to go to Bridget, who I know has lots of questions, and I have somebody else. Bridget.
Oh, sorry.
That's really loud.
How about now?
That's a bit better.
Okay. See, I'm so enthusiastic. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Quinn, for allowing me to join this meeting. I've got a few questions. I'm just going to group the first two because they're about process, really. So, with regards to this meeting, I just want to confirm that people on the committee can suggest new recommendations. Someone has to propose, someone has to recommend, and then members vote on that. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the second issue about process is that Rottingdean Parish Council is the third tier of government. The councillors there are elected every 4 years by residents, just as we are on the City Council. And there isn't really any reference to the very detailed response that they provided. And I don't think that their response should be treated as just any kind of regular organisation. They're democratically elected, they're regulated. So I would like to request that members of the committee do, during this meeting, get sent the letter that the parish council submitted. And I'd also like to request that it's included as an addendum to this meeting so members of the public can also see it. So I hope that's possible, please. I'd just like to read out one of the paragraphs from the parish council's letter, which is that they consider that the review process has not been correctly followed. The financial and policy case for the closure of Rottingdean Library is weak, that the impact analysis is incomplete, and the proposed mitigation is inadequate. So my request is, can you send the letter to members of the committee as soon as you can, please? And I would like to know from officers why this information that they provided has not been included in their report.
Bridget, just quickly, that letter was sent to everybody on the committee, the letter from Rottingdean. And we can't add anything to the addendum after the meeting, but just to reassure you, they have been sent that. But not the consultation response. But the consultation response is actually very similar to the letter, because I've read both.
Okay. All right, that's good to hear, because actually members hadn't got it a couple of hours ago, so that must have gone out.
Yeah.
And I'll just quickly do my other questions.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the report before you, if everyone could go to section 3.34, please, where it says that Rottingdean Library is the most proportionally expensive community library because it's in a grade 2 listed building. Now, the council has the freehold to this building and maintenance obligations, and these will continue indefinitely. And we were told multiple times by officers that the running costs of the building was irrelevant to the proposed closure of Rottingdean Library. And so it's quite disappointing to see this information still included in the report. So I would like to ask officers why it's still in the report. I would like them to confirm that it's not relevant to the decision that will go to Cabinet.
Hi there, this is Kerris Howard, the Head of Library Service. Just to reassure that what you're referencing was in the original Cabinet paper that went in July. It's not in this scrutiny report, and that level of detail isn't going into the Cabinet report in December. Originally, when we were looking at the savings across the whole service, across the next few years, we were looking at every element of it. Then we've honed it into the proposals, which are now have been consulted on and are now being discussed, ready for Cabinet in December.
Okay, so can you please assure residents, Councillor Roberts, can you please reassure residents of Rottingdean that the costs of running the Grange will not be a factor in the decision that's made?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Finally, sorry, Councillor O'Quinn, just one more question.
No, it's fine.
So in the section we just saw ideas and alternative options, we never actually got a breakdown of how exactly £25,000 was spent on Rottingdean Library. But we pushed on anyway, and Councillor Earthy and I suggested that a day of staff time was grabbed from Patcham, Hangleton and Portslade libraries, which are all staffed for more days than Rottingdean Library. And we thought that was very sensible and perfectly feasible, given how well used the library is in Rottingdean. And the answer that we received was that basically, if the proposal that goes to Cabinet differs too much from the original proposal, then there would have to be another consultation. So my question is, why didn't you consider our suggestions to grab these days from other community libraries? And I'd like you to reassure people that I know we've already heard that you haven't already made a decision, but the email that I had from Library Services really did give that impression. If you differ too much from the original proposal, you'd have to go out and do another consultation.
I'm assuming the question there is then that if we followed your suggestion of, as you put it, not me, grabbing hours from other local libraries, we would have to go out to consultation. That's my understanding, and it's also my understanding that if we took again our usual term, grabbed hours from other libraries, they would have to go to possibly the most used libraries. In this case, it would mean that we would probably have to go to Jubilee Library to mitigate their early 2 hours savings that they're going to, and Hove, because they would be the most used. So that's my understanding. It would need to go to reconsider to consultation again, because it would involve other areas of the city. So that's why. But it would be certainly it's taken into consideration, and we'll go into the report to Cabinet.
Yes.
We have a legal thing on that, because my understanding is this consultation is about closing libraries. Libraries often change their hours of use, don't they? So, yeah, I have got my mic on. So I'm speaking through the chair though. So I can speak to you if you like, is that this consultation is about closing libraries. So I'm not necessarily agreeing with Bridget's proposition, but I don't think that that's quite right. I don't see why you would have to go through a big consultation if you just did something different and didn't close them, because it's the statutory consultation, isn't it, about closing, while changing the hours of libraries, I would have thought, is something that the library service do anyway at various times.
So the statutory service that we offer encompasses all of the libraries and all of the ways that we offer services around the city. And so if we were to make any considerable changes that could make a difference to the delivery of a comprehensive and efficient service for the residents and for those who work and study in the city, that's when we would need to consult. So we would be in consultation with DCMS and legal advice, certainly. But if there are any considerable changes to service delivery, then we would need to go back out to consult. If we were to make changes to other libraries, then we'd be impacting residents in those areas and people who are using those libraries, and it would be fair to give them the opportunity to contribute to the consultation.
Okay, I think that's fine. Can I just make a comment? It's wrong for us to be pitting community libraries against each other, but that is where we are. Like, our suggestion was that Hangleton Library is staffed for 3 days a week. At the moment, Rottingdean is staffed for 2 days, but Hangleton has fewer visitors than Rottingdean. So it would seem to us that moving hours between the community libraries would enable more of them to stay open, and that's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think the point back was that there would have to be another consultation on that, although I do understand the point that Sue Shanks made, that, you would think you could change a few hours, which is a bit different to closing a library, but obviously closing or maybe not having a library open for a couple of hours a day or something necessitates yet another consultation. As I understand it, that's what has been said. But Bridget, is that all your questions?
For the moment, should we see how things pan out? But thank you.
Okay, Bridget. No, well, thank you for your contribution. Yes, Anna.
So just on those points, we've sought, in terms of Sue saying, can we have legal advice? We have sought legal advice in terms of consultations and whether we need a second consultation. But in terms of the suggestions, so such as moving the hours around and all of the other suggestions, as part of the Cabinet paper, not only will we include the consultation responses for Cabinet, but we will be going through all of the suggestions and have done needs analysis and looked at whether we can do those to put alternative proposals forward. So that's the work that's happening at the moment. So all of those proposals will be looked at and considered as part of the report that will go to Cabinet.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification, Anna. That really helps. Okay, thank you. And now I move to Sam Parrott.
So I've got a million questions, but I'll stick to my top two for now. In terms of annual visits to the libraries, we've got some footfall here, which is great. I'm just curious really about the footfall and how that breaks down in terms of usage per head as a individual user as opposed to footfall specifically, and how many people are repeat users, and do we have demographic data on them? And also in the new equality needs assessment that's been done, are we actually exploring what their needs are within that? So if we look at who's using it, the demographics of those, and what their assessment looks like in terms of equalities, was my first question. Do you want me to ask my second question, or do you just want to look at that first? I'll come back.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so thank you. Yes, it's a bit of a complicated picture. As you can imagine, there's a massive amount of data that has already been gathered and gone through for that needs and use analysis for part one. We've now gathered a ton more data through the consultation process, which we're now adding in needs and use analysis part two. We're building on that, and all of that is feeding into recommendations and how councillors will make their decisions, but also into the equalities impact assessment, which is looking at absolutely everything. I hope you can be assured that it's a really robust piece of work that we're doing, and as you know, a really robust process in the council about how we look at that. As far as footfall and users go, we can count the number of people coming in and out of a library using a thermal image counter on the door, so we know how many bodies are moving in and out of the library at different times of the day. We can see where people are registered to use. We can see where they're borrowing books. But there are things that we can't see. So if there's somebody coming in to study in Jubilee every Wednesday, but they go to Hove on a Thursday, they might come in and only register as a footfall. So we wouldn't know it was the same person over and over again. So that's what we looked at in the consultation period. And that the questions in the consultation are really going into that detail. How do you use the library? What do you use the library for? Which libraries do you use? And we can see from there that a lot of customers are using more than one library. We know that if you live in Westdean, you may use Westdean Library, but if you work in Hove, maybe you're using Hove and maybe you're popping into Jubilee for an event. People are using multiple libraries across the city. So we're trying to dig into that data and really look at the nuances, and that can help us to find mitigations for the impact. We recognise that there will be impact. If libraries close or if we reduce opening hours, then it will impact on some people, and that's what the impact assessment is for, to recognise that and find mitigations where we can.
Yeah.
So then the following thing that I was really concerned about is, given the strategic direction that the government and the council are going in terms of using more community spaces and having dispersed services, so things like, and I know I'm not saying a library will be suitable, it's just, mental health hubs, but we're also looking at family hubs, we're looking at more kind of community-based services. And closing or reducing, some of these spaces that are community feels to me like slightly short-sighted, and that we should be looking at some of these areas to see if we can multi-purpose them, because that is the direction of travel for nearly everything these days in terms of, we're trying to take stuff out more into the community and place more stuff out. So housing, advice, some of the things that we offer as council, which we're trying to take out to our communities, and yet we're closing community spaces at a time when community spaces have an absolute premium. As somebody who tries to hire rooms for local meetings, it's very, very hard to find these kind of spaces. So, that kind of concerns me in terms of once a building's closed, it's really then, its value starts to deteriorate, the upkeep of it starts to, deteriorate. So that's just, a concern, and I'm just wondering, and I'm curious about how that's been kind of thought about in terms of the direction of travel that definitely the government, and I would therefore hope that the council, are also really thinking about that in terms of the way we go forward.
I think this falls under. See, I think what we've got to try and understand is we've been asked through the budget setting process to make the saving within the library service. It's not. If we've been asked to make a bigger study, that's the point that has been made. That the saving is within the library service, and that was what decided at budget. It's not. You could. You're quite right. You could. You could say that the Rottingdean space won't disappear. It'll still be there. It could still be used as a community space if somebody could take that on. What we're looking at here is just removing the library service.
I guess I don't mean in terms of a community, like a VCSE taking that on. I actually meant in terms of us as a council, given that surely our trajectory is to start to move things out into community. So, actually we're closing a space that we're currently using and that's staffed and manned for some things, and that actually that we, if we start to look at some of the services, we could put that. And I understand the point about you've been asked to look very specifically at library budget, But as a council, obviously, we have also an obligation, surely, to take a step back and look at things more strategically, which I think was my point.
I think we need to hold on to, we've still got 10 libraries in the city. And in terms of what you're saying, Sam, in terms of having community spaces and providing access, there will still be access. Whether people feel it's in the right place or not is a different conversation to be having. But, you know, in terms of looking at West Dean, we've looked at Patcham being an accessible library. In terms of Rottingdean, we've looked at Woodingdean and Saltdean being accessible libraries. So in terms of moving wider council services into the communities, we still do have offices and accessible spaces within those areas. So yes, it would still be possible even with these 3 library closures.
Thank you. Yes, and just to emphasise the point Sam was making, was that this is the time perhaps when we really need these community spaces after COVID, because there has been a really serious sort of, lowering of community space, very hard to find community spaces. And also, I'm very aware that Jubilee Library is somewhere where we all go to for events. I've ever been there to get a book out. It's very heavily used for events, which is why it has such a high footfall. So a great community space in the centre of the city. Okay, I've got our next people. So Jasmine.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say at first thank you to David, Alicia and Sarah for talking to us. It was really nice to hear from you. And I have a few questions. Would you like me to do them one by one? Okay, thank you. So first of all, for clarity, I wanted to ask, are all the libraries extra affected by the Jubilee opening times? Okay, because my question was then, with the Jubilee opening times reducing, I'm assuming that's going to have a very large effect citywide on the libraries' extra times, as we know that many of the libraries are only manned 1 day a week. And if we're going to cut down that libraries' extra time as well, I think there should be more emphasis of that in the pack, because I didn't see much talking about that. And I would also want to know more about the footfall for those library extra times, if those hours were going to be cut in the other parts of the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so if Jubilee Library opening hours were to reduce and we were to take the management time out of there, that's how Libraries Extra is currently supported around the city. So it would have potential impact on Monday evenings for 2 hours and Sunday afternoons for 3 hours. The footfall, Libraries Extra, I don't have the data in front of me, but those are quieter times. So Libraries Extra tails off into the evenings in the same way as the main libraries. And again, on Sunday afternoons, it's one of the quietest times of the week. So it would have some impact, but it would be less than at other times. We are looking at other ways that we could potentially support Libraries Extra to be delivered through digital innovation and different ways of working. We don't have anything available to go in April if these changes were to be implemented, but it is something that we're looking at so that we can minimise that impact.
I also wanted to ask about when collecting the data of the survey. I was looking at 2 parts of the survey. With the age, I know there's only 2,700 survey responses, but looking at the young age range, 0 to 15 and then 16 to 24, I also understand you have to be 13 to complete the survey, I believe. So 13 to 24, there are only around 100 responses. And from my understanding, young people are some of the biggest users of these facilities. So I was sort of questioning the accuracy of this survey data to do this if it's only 100 responses. And then also when looking at the survey with the question asking why you use this service, the only time revising was shown was in the other option. And from my own experience with my A-levels, GCSEs and peers, we use the library predominantly as a space to work together to revise. So I was sort of questioning the accuracy of that aspect, as it didn't include one of my age group's biggest reasons to use the library. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback. We were doing all we could to get as broad a range of responses as we could, and I know that I personally and my colleagues were walking around Jubilee Library and Hove libraries at the times proposed for closure, talking to many of the students, asking them to fill in the consultation. We did get a bit of a boost later on in the survey period when we were doing that, but it was difficult to engage with enough young people. For those under 13, we had a lot of parents who were filling in with their children, and we were engaging with families again in the libraries and encouraging them to give their feedback. And we received feedback, for example, through Westdean School directly from school children, so that helped. Thank you for the point about revising. Obviously, we missed a point on there, and that's something which we'll take forward for any future consultations.
Thank you. Can I just add one comment?
Yes, that's fine.
I just wanted to add that I think the colleges are really great ways to communicate with people, as it's about 6,000 people between Baswick and Barndean, and the Youth Council will be very glad to help you with that, as we can get quite a lot of responses. So if you wanted to reach out about that, we'd be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Right. I now go to Sue. Sue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Obviously, I've got some thoughts as well, but in terms of questions, so the PFI contract and how, what the implications for that, because it finishes in 29, I think. I also understand there's a new library strategy coming, so, how's that going to be? Why is that happening then? You haven't looked at it now if you're thinking about changing. In terms of the council, the thing that's put in there, what do you call it? Council advice and support. I've got a different question about that really, which I should ask in a different arena. But when you go into Jubilee Library now, it's quite off-putting for people, I think, who go to get advice anyway. And I know that the library staff aren't very happy with how that's going. But you seem to be using that in this paper as a justification for not, for example, starting later. Because you could. I'm not sure how you measure your footfall, whether you measure just morning, afternoon, but I would imagine that also quieter time is probably first thing. So, you say somewhere, well, we couldn't open later because of the impact on the council services. But the council services were only put in there, presumably to save money in other budgets. I'm not sure where that budget, did that go into libraries? The budget that was for the people in Town Hall who used to be taking the phone calls, who are now in the library, who are library staff. The budget, was that saving on that budget? Was it saving on the library's budget? We did put an amendment in at the time to remove the saving on libraries, but I just want to know, the details of that really, because it's not very clear. And, I don't think you've really answered Rottingdean's questions about the actual process, because they're concerned that the process wasn't done properly, that according to the government's rules on it. So I'd like you to answer that really. And also, I suppose that one of the statistics that was interesting, that people do stay quite a long time in the library. I was really surprised that actually most people stayed more than an hour. I'm pretty emotionally attached. My mother was one, but I go to the library, and I think people, it isn't just about the library. So I suppose it's also, how do you value that? Because we can value the fact that you can go borrow books, but that I go on book club and stuff. People go because it's just somewhere to pop into that's nice, but they seem to stay quite a long time as well. It's not, if they were just going in to look at something quickly, they would be less than an hour if they just went to borrow a book. So I suppose it's just the time, not just the footfall as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
I think there was a couple of questions in there. So I don't know, Keris, if you can approach them. Yeah, I'll leave it with you.
Okay, so I think one of the questions was about the new library strategy and the PFI. The answer is yes, we are reviewing the strategy. Our strategy runs out at the end of this year, so next year we will be writing a new strategy which will take us through to the other side of the PFI contract on Jubilee finishing. So I think that answers that. For the council help desk, yes, there was staff budget allocated which came across to the libraries to support the delivery of that service within the libraries. Yes, we did look at the potential for opening later, but it would have impacted on the council help desk and switchboard services. And then the processes, I'm not sure what the question was about that one. We might come.
Sorry,
yeah.
Which they asked at the beginning, that they felt that you hadn't followed what was laid out in the national directions to follow processes. So I didn't write those particulars down. I think Bridget also asked the same question. I don't think we've really had an answer to that.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we've had legal advice on it, and we've had the advice from the Department for Sport and Media and Culture, who seem quite happy that we're following their process. And I mean, from what I've seen, I'm quite happy that we followed the process.
To be specific, DCMS, they're responsible for the superintendents and the promotion of libraries. They state that if a local authority wishes to make changes to library provision, the service should be able to demonstrate that we have consulted with local communities alongside looking at an assessment of need. Both of those parts we've referenced, the needs and use analysis, and then that 12-week public consultation. Considering a range of options to sustain library service provision. As a council, we're always considering our options and looking at the best ways to deliver services. And we've also had those alternative ideas suggested to us through the consultation. And then that rigorous analysis and assessment of potential impact of proposals. We have already done an equalities impact assessment around the consultation period. And then we're preparing a really detailed impact assessment which will be coming to the December Cabinet. So we've followed all of those processes, including that 12-week public consultation.
Yeah, sorry, I just found their letter. So, I mean, maybe you need to tell them that, and because they're suggesting that you haven't consulted with them about how, for example, you could, partner with social enterprises, charities, etc. There's nothing in this paper that says anything's been done about that, whether that would work or not. So at the moment, we're proceeding to just closing something. Once you close it, it's too late to go around and say, oh, would you have run this if we hadn't closed it? So I think that's the concern. You say that's happening, but we haven't got any evidence of that.
As part of the consultation, one of the questions was about whether other areas, people, organisations have alternative suggestions, and would they like to work with us to develop those alternatives. So Hollandine, you'll notice there isn't anyone here. They're working with us. They're very clear what they want. And we're working with them on supporting them to develop a community library. They came forward and have met with us. So we're very, very open to that. It is part of our proposals, and we do want to work with community groups on doing that, and we will give all the support we can.
To come to your final point about people staying for more than an hour, yes, lots of people stay, particularly at the larger libraries, for more than an hour. But I think this is an opportunity to just note that the data is only ever as good as what people tell us, and that's only ever as good as who offers to tell us. I don't know if I've phrased that very clearly, but if you're popping in to return a book or pick up a book, then you're less likely to fill in the public consultation than those people who are around for an hour and we happen to come by and talk to them about it. I think we recognise that not everybody will have chosen to fill in the consultation. So the data we've got from that is only as good as the number of people who have come back to us on it. So I think that there will be plenty of people who we know come in, use the library very briefly, and go back out again who probably didn't engage with the consultation.
Anything else, Sue?
Well, I've got a proposal at the end, but...
Okay. I know one of my thoughts when I was reading this was, I know you're doing this sort of extra impact assessment, equality thing for Cabinet. It's just a shame that it wasn't done ready for this committee, because I think we would have been really interested in that, because it means that we're not seeing something that's actually going to committee in December. And so perhaps the timings could have been such that we were able to look at that, because I think that's what we're really interested in, is the impact and the equalities aspects of this. But we're not going to be able to look at that. And you keep referring to that you're going to do it. So it's just disappointing that we won't be able to look at that. And only the Cabinet is really going to be able to look at that and, ask any questions about it or whatever. So, I just think that's a shame. So I'm now going to go to Ivan. I'm trying to, be fair in who you represent, etc., etc.
Always fair, Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Robbins, for being here today. It's pleasing that you've heard 2 deputations from residents in Westdean Ward. The feeling, the strength of upset about Westdean Library going to potentially to be closed. Obviously, you were at the school where there was a couple of hundred people present. There's been letters written by school children, more than 100 to the council. The press were outside. We had BBC cameras outside. This isn't just a facility. It's a nicety for Westdean. It's something that resonates through residents through and through. So I do hope that sentiment is actually passed through to the Cabinet. I've got 4 questions at this particular moment. My first one is that when this was mooted back in February this year, the Conservative group put forward some recommendations to the Labour administration to reduce costs in the event that you were looking at closing libraries. As I understand, those recommendations have not been responded to and dismissed. I think as part of the consultation process, there needs to be an answer to those. And just as a reminder to the people in this room, so the Conservative group recommended that rather than spending money on the equality, diversity and inclusivity, which costs about £100,000 per year, that those monies can be used towards saving our libraries. So I think an answer actually needs to be given to that, even if it's going to be dismissed. And actually, leading on to that, in terms of the process, we would like to know what other cuts have been considered from the budget. We all appreciate that budgets are short, but to actually reduce the funding for libraries is very, very low-hanging fruit. As I mentioned, Councillor Robbins, as you're aware, we're looking at Westdean Libraries is 0.02% of the council's budget. And if you can't find savings elsewhere, then I don't get where you can. And how councillors can actually be present and be elected and wanting to close libraries. How can you look at yourselves in the mirror? Really that is something we should not be here as elected councillors to do. That when there's other areas that can be looked at for cutting costs. So I think we need a deeper response for that. My second question is, as I mentioned, as we're all aware, for Westdean Library, it's £20,000 per annum. But again, the feeling from residents and groups is that it's almost a done deal. Obviously, you've given out the process. Should this be agreed upon by Cabinet, the process and when staff will actually be dismissed or given notice. Well, in Westdean, we only have one member of staff, only works one day a week, so there's not going to be much ado there. But residents are asking, why couldn't you have done it the other way round by actually going to residents and groups and saying, look, £20,000 per year is the cost for Westdean Library. The council will meet X amount of those costs. come up with some ideas. Come up with some ideas to actually bridge the shortfall. And some of those were given at the Withdean School. Give residents the opportunity to actually come up with fundraising. I'm sure we can get and bridge that gap. So residents are feeling that they haven't been given the time to do that, and the decision has almost been made. So I would like the Cabinet to consider that.
Ivan, can I just butt in? Can you just make your questions a bit more succinct?
Okay.
Because you've got very long statements where we're not sure where the questions are.
Okay, Jim. My third one is going to be really, really short. The process, in our opinion, seems to be flawed because you talk about based on distance, wealth, quite a lot. Really, both of those, in our opinion, shouldn't actually be there in a big, or have people actually walked the walk? It has been mentioned earlier on that the distance between Westdean Library and the next library, Patcham Library, is more than 2 miles. Elderly people, younger children won't be able to do the walk. We're talking up and down hills. And what has wealth got to do with it? What has wealth got to do with it? If you want to take out a book, whether you're wealthy or poor, does it really matter? If there's no other library around, wealth should have no impact whatsoever. So we don't understand the process in that regard. And finally, the needs and use analysis that's been mentioned in the report. Again, residents are asking what are the percentages, what is the formula for that? You're talking about least deprived area in Brighton, Hove is Westdean. Well, fine, again, but there is no other civil building within miles of the library. So the library in Westdean isn't just a library, it's a place for people to meet in a civil place. There's no other options, and the argument about closure for minimal impact, again, residents are saying that's flawed because the next library is some distance away. So I do appreciate I've mentioned 4 points, but passions run high in regard to Westdean Library because, again, once the library is closed, and if it is closed, there's nothing around for miles. There's no other council building for people to meet, groups, etc. Yeah,
I think, okay. Should we let them answer now, Ivan? Made your point.
Can we pick questions out of that? I mean, it seemed to me that you was asking questions and then answering them. But I'm sure, Keris, I don't know if you can.
I think
you've been scribbling notes.
We've got it. The consultation recommendation to reduce costs in other ways. So that one was for you.
Budget setting.
That was about budget setting and the potential to divert funds from EDI to save libraries.
Well, that was a decision made, wasn't it? I mean, that was a decision in the budget that you put an amendment to, and I don't think it was a great saving that you was asking us to make by doing away with the anti-racism. I did look up what your, I think it was about 100,000. Yeah, well, it was 210,000 we was asked to save from the library's fund, so it's a partial saving, and it was decided that no, we didn't want to cut that. So yes, that may have been, in your opinion, wrong, but that was the way that the amendment fell. So that's why the amendment didn't pass. So what we're saying is the amendment was to save £210,000 from the library's budget. You put an amendment in which we couldn't find acceptable, so it fell. So that answers really why why we didn't take up that option.
The next question was about asking residents and groups for other ideas. So we've opened that through the consultation, and we've received, like you say, at the meeting we had ideas, and a lot came through the consultation. Those have been collated and they will be going to Cabinet for consideration. So, yeah, thank you for that. And then there was the question about
on wealth and disadvantage.
So in the paper that went to Cabinet in July, when we were considering which libraries to put forward for proposals to go out to consultation, we do detail in there how we made that decision for which recommendations to make. And that was looking at a combination of usage statistics, distance between libraries, and also areas of deprivation around the city. It's not that we want to deprive any particular community of access to a library service. It's that with reduced resources, we have to prioritise those to areas of greatest need. And that's where the indexes of deprivation come in. So that's why that's included in the needs and use analysis. And we are adding to that through the consultation with all of the feedback that we've had.
Thank you. Right, I now move on to Bernadette.
Hello, Bernadette Kent here, speaking for the Older People's Council as their secretary. I want to begin with one point not mentioned so far. Libraries are cited as warm spaces for people struggling with fuel bills, especially coming into the winter. They are a wonderful community asset, providing safe spaces to meet, be out and about, and be active in life, and so are protective of social isolation. They provide safe and warm study spaces, social spaces where people can interact in activities like book clubs and film nights and game nights. They are multifunctional places. And given the cost of living crisis, places to read newspapers, books, magazines, rent films, music, that for those on very limited means, like pensioners, like people on benefits, they can ill afford those things these days. The council needs to be mindful of reducing this valuable infrastructure. Communities need it to thrive. And I'd like to know, with the Equalities Impact Assessment, if the needs analysis on the impact on well-being of the community.
Yes, I'd like to reassure you that through the Equalities Impact Assessment, we are looking at the impact on all the identified groups around the city that would be impacted, and in particular we are looking at the impact on older people and what that might mean, and identifying mitigations which could support older people.
Yes, and just to say that I think it was particularly Rotting Dean caught my eye, that 30% of people living in Rotting Dean are over 65, and half of those are over 70. So I thought that was quite interesting, because even though they might own their own home, it's still quite an effort to get buses to go to Saltdean and so on. So that does kind of emphasise your point, that it's a bit different when you're 70, 75, 80, whatever, and walk down the road, to then getting buses and so on. And you might not need your books delivered to you, you fall in between two stalls. So I think that's quite an important area, I think, about older people. Thank you, Bernadette. Did you have any other questions? No, that's fine. Thank you. And TJ.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'm going to do this in two sections, if that's okay. So I'm just going to start off kind of going through, so starting off with, of course, when you are talking about closing Westdean and Hollandbury libraries, obviously both of them, their closest, nearest library would be Patcham. So would the excess pressure that you then put onto Patcham Library negate some of the benefits of the cuts in the first place, and undermine to an extent how much this will help you fill that 210k gap you've talked about? And also, I was just wondering if you could talk about how you've costed these individual cuts, as some of the libraries you've talked about closing will save not even a quarter of the amount that cutting 2 hours at Jubilee would save us. I was wondering if you could just very quickly talk about how you figured out how much each library's cut would save.
I was just going to make the point that, and I think partly what you were saying about Jubilee Library, closing Jubilee Library affects all the libraries because of the libraries extra thing. So we could have made the savings, or the savings could have been suggested by just reducing hours at Jubilee, and probably very successfully achieved by cutting hours at Jubilee. But that would have affected all the other libraries because they couldn't have operated the libraries extra at the time that we'd lost those hours at Jubilee.
Yeah. In addition to that, I would just add that an hour lost at Jubilee will impact a larger number of people, and the people who use Jubilee and Hove, but particularly Jubilee, come from all over the city, all wards, as well as people who work and study in the city and live outside of it. So it would have a broader impact if we had honed the saving into just that one library or just the two larger libraries. That was one of the reasons that we looked across it all. In answer to how they're costed and what the pressure might be on Patcham, I think that's a bit, those are intertwined, those two. So what we've looked at is reducing the saving that can be made by reducing the staffing times, of taking those out, and then some of the running costs. So things like the cleaning and waste disposal and some of the security costs. We haven't taken out the entire budget, so we haven't taken out the book budget, for example. So the book budget allocated to Rottingdean will not disappear. We won't buy less books as a library service. We will reallocate those resources to other libraries. So it might be that Saltdean, Woodingdean, Patcham have more books coming in. If we know that more young people are going to be using those libraries, maybe we'll be boosting the children's area. And the same for the staff resource we put into running events and supporting communities in those areas. We can hone those into the libraries which we retain. So we're not proposing to remove the library service from those people. We're proposing that they can meet their needs in another place. I hope that answers that.
Thank you. I just also want to talk a bit about the cuts and why these cuts have had to come in general, because I think it's safe to say no one wants to get up in the morning and go, I want to close the library. Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe a reformed government efficiency programme might quite like it, but luckily they're not around here at the moment, so we don't need to find out. But at the end of the 2024 Parliament, since 2010, the average local government budget had been reduced per person by 20% when adjusting for inflation, which is a heck of a lot of money, especially as pressures go up on ECHPs, on services such as adult social care, on home to school transport, all of which we cannot cut. We have to fund them, no choice about it. So, obviously, it's easy to talk about, in fear of quoting the soundbite, after 14 years of the Tories deciding to destroy the economy, it's quite easy to see. It's quite easy to lay the blame at their feet. And I think I might get a stone chucked to me if I mention the I-360. But also, we are paying £2 million a year for that. So would it be a fair assumption to say that these libraries that we're having to close are closures being forced with having to take the blame for decisions taken by central government and a party's inability to run the economy?
Yes. I think there's a lot in what you're saying, and it was put to me at one time that actually when I started as a councillor, which is 15 years ago, we are now getting probably 60p for every pound that we used to get then. So, and we're now having to take on, as you quite rightly say, far more adult social care, far more children's services, and far more everything else. And Anna at the end there, who has responsibility for all these things, will tell you that it's great. They're right. Nobody wants to shut libraries, as Councillor Lyons quite rightly said. I didn't get here in the morning and say, I'll tell you what's a great idea, let's close a few libraries. You didn't, nobody did. But it's where we are and what we're left with. But again, to reiterate, no decisions have been made. And we are still looking as best we can with people to try and mitigate what we're doing and try and help what we're doing. And I know Councillor Lyons said again that did we look at, when we spoke to people in West Dean, did we look at alternative ways of running that library? But they said themselves when they did their deputation, they didn't see how they could do it through volunteers and they didn't see how they could do it in other ways. So obviously we'd looked at that and they'd looked at that and just didn't feel that they could do it in that model. So yes, we've looked at different models, and yes, it is, as you quite rightly point out, a symptom of what's gone on in local government in the last few years. I don't know if you want to add anything, Teresa.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Okay. Can I just make a quick point there? Because earlier they were saying, I know Anna and Harris were saying they would be putting forward some of the ideas that have come up through this. But obviously you're not going to Brighton Dean because you're saying they didn't come up with any ideas that you could use, that were, doable, basically. So just maybe a bit of a response on that.
One of the appendices, I think it's going in the appendices, can't quite remember.
It might be in the report.
We're still working on it, but we're basically going through every idea that's come up and then the kind of other things that people have said. So some of the ideas have been, could areas run community libraries? And we hand the provisions over, we're saying we'll hand the books, we'll hand the shelves, we'll hand the tables, we can hand those things over, and here you are, community run a library. Some of the conversations we've had with some groups, as I said, Hollingbury are saying, yes, we want to run a community library, please do that. Other areas have said, actually, we don't want to do that, or we won't be able to find volunteers. So those will go into the kind of proposals. So these are the proposals, and then these are some of the things of whether they would or wouldn't work. We are open and are still open to having conversations with people about whether we could do community asset transfers and give people the books, the shelves, the tables and everything else to enable communities to run community libraries. That would be our preferred option. And if we could go in, write our cabinet paper saying the three areas have come back and would like a community library and we can support them. So we back out as a local authority in terms of saying we can no longer provide a statutory library because we've had our budgets cut, we can't put the staff in, but we'll hand the assets over to community. That would be mine and Keris's preferred option.
Okay, yeah, but I kind of understand Rotting Dean had a bigger footfall, so it's a bigger thing for them to do and to provide volunteers for and so on. It's more challenging.
I'll come back to Councillor Shear's comments.
No, not really, not now, Ivan, because they're going to be political. So I think I just want to get on with the questions. You can come back to TJ later. So, Maureen. Now, Maureen.
Thank you, Chair. What I wanted to bring up was the long-term view, because I'm not really hearing that we're going beyond the point at which we've reduced hours and closed down some of the community local library provision. I'm not hearing anything about where we're going. And a couple of other points, which is I've read about other authorities that have diverted funding from other income sources, for example, investment in sports facilities, where it makes a profit. They're allowed to take some of that money and actually support libraries better. So that might be something that we could look at in terms of different funding streams and whether it's possible to do that. I'm also interested in what is the mitigation to put in place to stop people either feeling deprived or actually being deprived of the resources that libraries bring to them. And are we actually thinking that the review of the strategy is going to be something that is exploring different ways of doing things? the danger is that we come up to this point where we say, well, we've cut all these libraries now, and now we have to operate as we are, instead of thinking, well, we've come to this point because we had to, but now we're going to start being more innovative and modernising the library service and doing things differently, doing innovations, using space differently, different kinds of service delivery. Libraries have changed a lot. They're not just about spaces with books in them. And we might be able to think of different ways that people could access those services in a better way, a more cost-effective way or a more innovative way. So I'm just thinking about all these things that we could be doing, but are we doing them? Or are we just locked into this cuts agenda and we're not going to branch out from it and mitigate the damage that might be done? Thanks.
Thank you, Maureen.
I'll partially answer it, then I'll pass you on to Dick. I think you're dead right, but what we're talking about there is a wider, far-reaching strategy, which is what we need to do long-term and what we're looking to do long-term, hopefully. The problem we have is that we voted through this cut in the library service in February in the budget, which we have to produce within this budget period. So that's what we're stuck with, and I think that's what you're saying in some ways. Are we going to say this is, we're doing this and it's enough, or are we then going to look to see how we could do things much better? And I think again, as you pointed out with the sports facilities, which falls under my brief as well, there are councils in the country that bring libraries under the same umbrella as their sports contract. So whereas we have Freedom Leisure running our sports contract, you could argue that do we bring libraries into that? Other councils bring things like theatres into it, cinemas, all sorts of different things. And that may be something we could look at in the future. But unfortunately, at the moment, we've got to make this saving within this budget period. And I'll leave Kerry Spain want to make some extra points.
Yeah, I wanted to answer your question about mitigations, and there will be a full equalities impact assessment. There will be a lot of detail in the Cabinet report about how the changes could be mitigated. But what we are proposing is that we maintain a comprehensive and efficient library service across the city, and that we recognise that people may have to travel a little further or visit slightly less often, but they will still have access to a library service. And I wanted to come on to your point about forward thinking, strategic thinking and innovation. We are refreshing our strategy next year. We are looking for ways to make this a sustainable library service going forward. We've already been doing a lot of work. We've had the co-location of the council help desks. We've also had adult skills and education coming into the Jubilee Library this year, which is a really great bit of co-location for us. Really makes sense as a whole council to have those services in together. And there's also opportunities with the new Moulsecoombe Hub, having a library in that hub, co-locating with a lot of other services. So there's lots of things that we're looking forward to, and we're really open to opportunities. So if there are other ways that we can co-locate and make best use of those community spaces. And I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that we are innovators in Brighton and Hove. 10 years ago, a library's extra card was a little bit scary and out there when looked at from other library authorities. The idea that you would have a library service open, unstaffed, and people would have a card and a pin, that was really innovative when it came into Brighton and Hove. It was one of the first places in the country to do it. And now people come from all over the country to see how we've done it, and other library authorities all over the country are joining us in providing self-service. So we really have been an innovative service, and we aim to continue to be so with our new strategy.
Question. You're saying that yes, the strategy will be innovative, and you have got a vision for the future. Might it help people to engage better with the consultation if they didn't see it as a kind of a blank brick wall where we're just aiming to get to that certain point and then there's nothing in the future? I think it's going to be really important to make people feel that this isn't just the end, it's actually the beginning, and that we ought to be looking up and we want to engage people with what a future library service might actually look like and might offer them. Because at the moment it just feels like everybody's on a downward trajectory and feeling really dismal about it. But we need to actually turn that around. But if we're going to end up where we are now, then people are just going to be incredibly unhappy, and we're not going to move forward. So I just urge you to kind of have that vision and then be talking to people and joining a lot of things up, like schools with libraries and, you know, different kinds of collections, and encouraging business users and all those things that we know can be done. Would bring income into the libraries as well. But yeah, we need to hear about it, and that would be really helpful. Thanks.
I mean, I think that's some of the work we really want to do going forward in terms of the library strategy, and we're in that unfortunate position where, and I'll go back to, you know, the decision was made last February to make a cut within the library at a point where we hadn't started thinking about our future strategy, but we were already thinking about, well, no, we had already begun to do the thinking and the conversations around the PFI ends in 2029. Our next strategy is going to take us over that period. So how are we going to sustain libraries in the city, and what does that look like? But unfortunately, this budget position we're in now has kind of happened before we progressed those conversations. And in some ways that has distracted us from probably work we would have chosen to do this year in beginning to do the early consultation bits around engaging people to develop the strategy. So we're on a bit of the back foot now in doing the work we want to do, and we're going to have to play catch up very quickly next year when we start writing the strategy. But what I hope is that people will become more engaged, because quite often when we go out developing a citywide 3, 4, 5 year strategy, we don't get that many people engaging in it. But hopefully more people will now be engaged in the strategy, because there'll be a recognition of how important it is to feed into the future of the libraries, because whatever happens in terms of the outcome on this consultation, we know that across the public sector there are going to be more cuts in the future, you know, that the PFI ends, and that we have to have a really good plan in the city about what we want our libraries to look like post 2029, because it will be different, because we no longer have the PFI on Jubilee Library. So I'm hoping that this will encourage people to join, as you said, more in the conversations we have around the future strategy.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Anna. Can I just ask, put in there, how much money are we going to save when that PFI ends? Because it has been incredibly expensive. And is the money we're going to save, all of it, going to go into the library services in this new way of doing things, maybe, innovation, or is a lot of it just going to go into the general council budget because we're not getting a lot of money there? I'm quite interested, because it should be a very substantial saving.
We have a very good deal on the PFI. It works very well in our favour. It's an expensive PFI, in that PFIs are expensive because we've got a lovely new modern building out of it, and it has paid for the cost of that building. It pays for the security of the building, it pays for the maintenance of the building, it pays for the cleaning of the building. It also pays for the whole of the book fund, for the whole of the city, for the e-books, for the newspapers. So it doesn't just pay for Jubilee Library, it pays for provisions to libraries across the city. So it has a really, really good deal, and it has enabled us to stay in a very good position, because, as TJ was saying before, costs have gone up, because within the PFI, it is very clear what has to be provided within the PFI. The costs haven't gone up proportionate to as they would have done if we weren't in the PFI, if that makes sense, because we're paying a certain amount every year for the PFI and they have to deliver these things and they can't put our costs up. So it is working really, really well for us, which is why we have to think very carefully as a city around what we want our libraries to provide and look like post the PFI.
Thank you, that's really interesting. So it's a lot better than the PFI that schools took on some years ago, because I think they struggle with theirs and I don't think they've got such a good deal. But I mean, I know that's in the future, but I think it's useful to know those things now. So, Ellen.
Thanks very much. Thanks for all the answers you've shared already, and I'm particularly like the points raised by Councillor Wender over there, where she drew out that this is an unfortunate position that we find ourselves in, where there is going to be a new library service strategy in 2026, yet we're making these cuts. And the impact of that, I mean, once a library is closed, how possible is it to come back from that? And often we have these meetings, not a lot of recommendations are being put forward. I would love to put forward a recommendation. If this could be supported, that would be great. But this is a big decision, and through the consultation we have heard that the cities are overwhelmingly against cuts, particularly closures. Whatever about reduction of hours, closures of libraries, it's a big deal. Could this not be brought to full council? For it to just be going to cabinet seems, just not allowing enough time to reflect on what is being put forward. I'm particularly concerned around comments that have been made in deputations today, but also by other councillors, about how we investigate alternative solutions as well. I understand that there is an appendix report going to cabinet. There is a more drawn out EIAs going to be provided to cabinet as well. It would have been really great to have those for this meeting. And I think if cabinet could agree to bring this to full council, we would then have an opportunity to do more debating. It's been referenced quite a few times today that no decisions have been made yet, which gives me a little bit of hope that maybe a decision might be made by cabinet to not make these closures. But some of the rhetoric also today sounds like we have to make these closures to make those savings that you've been asked to make. So one recommendation is to bring this to full council. We have 2 full councils before budget council, so December and January, that maybe we could debate this further. The other thing I wanted to raise as a recommendation is around those equality impact assessments, that as you are preparing them for December cabinet, that we could also look at the economic value of public libraries that they bring, as well as the social benefits that are generated by public libraries, that we think and consider the spend to save scenario. So prevention schemes, for example, that will be impacted, the impact on other services. So for example, we save 25,000 from a closure, but we increase the costs in health or social care by 100k because of increased isolation for a particular group of vulnerable people. What impact does that closure have financially? Will that be impacting the council elsewhere? Have we looked at that? And I found a report that was commissioned by the Libraries Connected East, where they were looking at how a typical public library generates approximately 1 million of social benefits per year. They were using the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy spending data from 2021 to 22, which illustrated a return on investment of at least 6 times the cost. So looking at those kind of far-reaching economic as well as social impacts from libraries. And they also talked in that report about some of the kind of innovative ways that we can look at running these services. So again, we close and we don't have that opportunity to innovate in these spaces ahead of those closures. So they were looking at the falls of prevention schemes in Herefordshire with 10 participants that produced over 8,000 in value each year through savings to health and social care. There was a men's mental health project in Norfolk that generated value of 60,000 per participant. There was a knit and natter group in Clacton that generated over 30,000 of value by reducing the impact on loneliness, on healthcare, productivity and well-being. In Cambridgeshire, there was a mobile library service that produced value of over 300,000 each year for more than 6,000 users, and a literacy programme for teenagers in Suffolk that generated over 300,000 in value for 650 participants. This is just an example of how we can look at the economic benefits as well as social. Thank you.
One sec.
Thank you. Yes, yes, thank you for that. Those things are being considered, but we will consider those points as well for our qualities impact assessment and for the cabinet reports that are going in December. Just to say that yes, that report is a really interesting piece of work, and as part of Libraries Connected South East, we're looking at something very similar for the South East, looking at the impact of loneliness and mental health and the financial value of that within libraries. So when that is published, I will definitely be sharing it with everybody. So thank you for raising those, and we'll definitely take them into consideration for Cabinet.
Yes, thank you very much, Helen. I think it's at the end we will put forward any recommendations and then we'll have a vote on them. And so you would need a seconder for that. So we can do that at the end, but we haven't finished on questions now. We're nearly there. So Anusri, you have a question.
Thank you. Yeah, I really welcome the previous deputations, which were well expressed, the concerns of our communities. I think some of the questions have, I've been adapting them whilst I've been hearing more about how this is playing out. And it really strikes me that this is quite unfortunate timing, in that there's going to be this reimagining of libraries, and yet this cohort of libraries will not be considered if they are closed down. And I wondered why the time frame is such that it is coming here now, and why the thinking wasn't done much earlier. This is several weeks before potential cuts, and that's really concerning. And so, I can see that you will be doing this reimagining, but it just feels very late. And I was going to say, things like, where does this fit into the overall strategy of Brighton and Hove Council in terms of levelling up and health and well-being, the social prescribing that could be in these spaces, digital inclusion, educate. You're all aware of all of these goals. And I just wondered, where does it fit into your overall strategy? These cuts seem so... just so badly timed, and I'm just so disappointed to see this, and especially as it feels like there is this thinking and new strategy coming in place. It just feels very late, and we can give all these proactive solutions, which I'm giving, but it just feels like a little pointless. If then are you actually going to consider these? Because there's ideas around generation income and enterprise, considering co-working, event hire, but this will take, some time to implement, and then expecting our communities to come up with ideas in a pretty short time frame and invest their time. So, I'm just quite interested what will happen with that. I'm curious, and things around, culture and social programming, can we do these in time for these libraries? How do we partner with art organisations, universities and schools in the time that are given? So, I would just like to know really what next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you. We take your point about the timing. We have a budget allocation that we need to work to for the next financial year, and that includes the savings which have already been agreed. So we need to be progressing this and these savings within this time frame in order to make the savings for the next financial year. I appreciate your points about the strategy, and we really do want to commit to looking fresh at our library service next year within a sustainable and efficient service within the budget that we've been allocated.
Yeah, and I will add that I think in some ways you're right. You know, it's unfortunate that this saving's got to be made in this financial year when we're talking about a longer term strategy. But that is unfortunately where we are. We've got to make the saving this year. I don't even at this stage. I wouldn't be sure how we could allocate that saving anywhere else, because we'd have to again, Anna might know if we could say, well, we're going to shut a nursery or do something else and make the saving there and carry on with the libraries. But I think you're right. I think it's in some ways back to front, but that's that's what was decided at budget and where we are with it really.
I was going to say, I do appreciate your specific constraints within the officers, within the people who've come to committee today, but this decision has been made elsewhere, and it just feels quite topsy-turvy, and it feels quite difficult, because I feel like we could be asking our colleagues here these questions, but they are within constraints themselves, and actually this issue has been decided elsewhere, and they are not here to answer for that decision.
Thank you, Anusri. Right, I am now going to go to Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I'd almost forgotten what I was going to say, but I will say that I thought I'd been transported into the Oval Office when I heard about, cutting DEI budget, and then we have actually spent a lot of time talking about equalities and inclusivity, and Councillor Lyons doesn't appear to be listening to me, but anyway. Well, I think there was a sharp intake of breath from most people on the committee. And yeah, we have been talking about equalities. And, anyway, first of all, one of the things that occurred to me was that when we made this decision, we could have actually written what was going to happen. We could have said, these people, this group, and this group are going to be upset. And rightly so, because cutting these services is really going to have a massive impact on people. Not a huge amount of people, but a lot of people who are nevertheless our residents, and they should be given. These services are so important, as we've heard from the various groups that are that have come to us, and from. I think Anne-Therese made some very good points as well. First of all, if we are looking at a new strategy, is there a possibility that we're only going to be mothballing these facilities for a limited amount of time? That's one thing. And the other thing is there any way we can actually go back on the decision for the cut? I mean, is it why are we sticking to the fact? Well, we agreed it in February. Are we going to be arrested if we don't do it? I mean, that's what. Yeah, I know. But I'm just asking because, is there any way that we can sort of say, okay, can we relook at this? I mean, I know we've only got till February, but it does seem that this is going to be a very damaging. Yeah. And the other question is, I'd like to know what were the reasons given by West Dean people that they couldn't they couldn't do volunteers, whereas Hollingbury Library and Rottingdean have already come up with some suggestions. So it seems to me that people are saying, well, we don't like this, but we don't really want to have anything to do with helping it out, so we don't have to close. Sorry if that all seems a little bit naive, but
It's an interesting question, Julie. I mean, could we could we change the decision? My understanding is we couldn't. But, you know, I could suggest, or you could suggest, perhaps we speak to the finance officer to see if it could be paused or cut or taken out. I don't know. It'd be, you know, if I was to say yes or no now, I'd be guessing. It was a decision we all took at the time. Rightly or wrongly, we all took it at the time. So it may be something that the committee would want to perhaps ask, and you know, that's up to the committee. It's not up to me to decide what they would ask. There would be a definitive answer. Then you would know yes you can, no you can't, or indifferent. What was the other point you was making about what did Westing? Yeah, I think.
Just to come back on the budget thing, so the budget is gone. It's already been taken out of the library budget. The library is contributing to some of this year's overspend currently because the budget decision was made in February last year for half of it to go in this financial year and then the other half to go in the next financial year, recognising we wouldn't have achieved the full £220,000 savings in this financial year. We haven't achieved any of it because we haven't done any of the work yet because it's taken longer than anybody really at the time had got their heads around how long it took. So in terms of the budget decision, I'm guessing that's a decision that would need to be made by Cabinet, but it's recognising that some of that budget decision is impacting on this year and next year, and that 220,000 would have to be found from somewhere else, and councillors will need to make the decision of where that £220,000 comes from. So I don't know whether it could be made, and that obviously would be a decision for Cabinet, but the money is no longer there. It's not about saying can we not make it. It's been made already, and the money has already gone from the library budget. We're just contributing to the overspend currently. In terms of Westing, do you want to answer that one?
In terms of Westing, we've received some alternative ideas from all of the libraries affected, including Jubilee and Hove, not just the libraries proposed for closure. We are considering all of those, and they will all be presented to Cabinet. If community groups would like to talk to us in more detail about what that might look like for them or the detail of it, they don't need to wait for December. They don't need to wait for a decision to be made. We'd be really open to having those conversations. So if there are groups who would like to talk to us in more detail about other options, please do come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm sort of judging from that when the decision was made for the budget earlier in the year, they already knew which libraries were going to be closed because they based the amount on that. It just sort of, it all just comes across a bit oddly. And then to go out to consultation and so on and say, are you okay with these libraries being closed, possibly closed, and so on? It has been not perhaps the most logical way of dealing with it, I think. You know, that we're sort of, you know, you're closing the gate after the horse has bolted type job is perhaps I'm gathering a feeling of this committee about the situation.
So when we were given a £220,000 saving within the libraries, the needs and use analysis has been part of that piece of work to help us map how are we going to make this saving. So, you know, as Keris was saying before, or I think it was Keris or Alan said, we could have gone with what on paper looks like an easy option and say we're going to close Jubilee Library all day on a Sunday and part of a Saturday. That would have made the savings. And Hove, but actually that has a massive impact on people across the city. So in terms of your question of were the libraries already identified and was that piece of work done? No, it wasn't. Once we were given the savings, then Keris and her team have done that piece of work, which is why I was saying earlier, in terms of the strategy, if we weren't doing the work on the savings, Keris's job this year, and when I first started this job in January, Keris and I were talking about using this year to begin to develop the library strategy for next year. We haven't done that piece of work because the savings were then taken in February, and we've spent all of this year doing the work on the library savings. So no, the decisions hadn't been made. It wasn't there. That's what the needs and use analysis has enabled us to do.
Okay. Yes, it just does seem awkward, let's put it that way. And I just wondered as well how much all of the consultation has cost, because it's all been quite lengthy. Sorry, Sue. I thought I'd just ask that question, because reading through everything, and I thought, gosh, it's lots of meetings, lots of trying to get into areas. So it's been quite an expensive consultation, I would argue.
It has been an expensive consultation, probably, if you were able to add up all officers' times, but it is a public consultation. It is something we have to do. We're not able to say exactly how much it will have cost us because we're not able to quantify, because equally a lot of the work that's being done we'll be able to use going forward in terms of the strategic development, because some of the work that we'd have been doing, like the needs and use analysis, a lot of that work we would have undertaken for the strategy. So it isn't, well, this has cost us a lot of money just to do this, because some of the work we would have done, we would have been doing in terms of the strategy. So in terms of looking forward and going forward, we'll be able to use a lot of this work. But any consultation has an impact on what we deliver as a council and adds up in terms of officer time. But that's the reality of a public consultation. And that's the reality of where we are in terms of doing a library closure. But the upshot will be, it will give us a lot more, and has given us a lot more information about who uses the library and how libraries are used. And that will be a positive thing for us as a council going forward.
An unintended bonus. But yeah, it's just interesting that there has been, there are costs involved in this, in officer time and so on. And
if I could just add and remind everybody, it was members and councillors who voted for this at budget. So, I know it now sounds like it's, well, you abstained, which means you couldn't make your mind up one way or the other. But from the point of view, the point of view was that it's now, I don't think it can fall at anybody else's door but ours. We were the ones who voted this saving in, and now we've got to try and make the most of it. And I don't think it does us any good to now sort of try and say, well, not me, Governor, it was somebody else.
I'm not sure anybody is saying that, actually, Alan. It's not me. I think we're all saying this was very difficult, and we all understand the pressures, really understand the pressures of the budget. They're massive, and they're even bigger next year. So it is a very frightening scenario. I think what we're trying to do today is look at the report we've been presented with, the results, and really discuss quite heavily the way that libraries contribute to the everyday life of residents in the city, community, all kinds of things, and in a sense, how important they are, and people's concerns about that. I think it is very much about that, Alan. So I'm now going to go to Teresa, who has a question, and then I'm going back to Bridget.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. The first one is just a quick answer, I think. But I noticed that there seems to be a correlation between the number of events held in the library and the footfall and usage of it. And was that a determinant factor in the selection of the 3 libraries for closure?
So I do want to go back to Westdean, and I will respond. I believe I've got an email about it, about the number of events, and just check where the data has come from. My understanding is that we have been running events at Westdean. They're not advertised in the same way always, because for those of you, I'm sure you know the space, it's a very small space. We can't run an event there in the way that we would at Whitehawk Library or Portslade or any of the medium-sized libraries. But Claire does an amazing job of really adding value to the visits, particularly for children and young people in that library. Even within that tiny space, she manages to do like a treasure hunt for the Summer Reading Challenge every year. We've had Dogs Trust visiting with dogs there. They have stories and rhymes when they can in a seasonal way and craft. So they really are doing what they can within that small space. And I know that they link up with the school with events that are going on there. So sometimes we're open when the school events are going on. So we are doing all that we can in Westdean, as we do for all of our libraries. However, our resources are really stretched. They're overstretched. And we cannot do as much outreach and events and those added value activities as we would like to do in all of our libraries. Again, looking at the sustainability of the service going forward, reducing the number of libraries would enable us to hone those activities into particular libraries with most need. Thanks.
Thank you. And my second question is to do with the equalities impact assessment and equalities generally. So I echo what various councillors have said about it is a shame that we haven't had the equalities impact, the expanded equalities impact assessment that's coming up. We haven't had that before this meeting. So I'd just like to register disappointment in that. The closure of these libraries, the closure of any library, leads to greater exclusion of a whole range of individuals and residents. And so will happen with the closure of these libraries. Now, the people with protected characteristics under the 2010 Equalities Act are fewer in each category area, but that accentuates the need, in my view, to protect the service for the vulnerable minority. The impact of loss of this service on individuals is significantly higher than it would be for those who have protective factors in their life. For example, family, a wide social circle, higher economic status, or they're digitally tuned in and they have access to Wi-Fi, for example. So I'm looking at the impact across the board of all of these people with individual protected characteristics or intersecting protected characteristics. So the loss of independence for disabled users who depend upon libraries for accessible formats of materials, easy reading, braille, people with visual impairments, people with cognitive impairments or physical difficulties do depend upon the facilities and the support that the staff in the libraries actually give them. Libraries are key for language learning and for cultural inclusion. So for those of our residents for whom English is a second language, it's really important that they have access to the range of books to support their second language learning, but also can get engaged in cultural inclusion through the library. It's a safe space for our migrant people and our refugees, and also minority ethnic communities, to access information and engage in civic life. And so losing that again represents a potential barrier to integration and community participation. We pride ourselves on being an inclusive city, and we're working very, very hard to reduce inequalities in all areas of our functioning. We are working towards being an ageing and dementia-friendly city. We're an anti-racist city. We're a city of sanctuary. And I wonder, my question to you is, with these closures, and I know but no decision has yet been made. But is there a tension between our aims as a city to reducing inequality, to being more inclusive, and cutting these services which disproportionately will affect and have an impact on most disadvantaged people in our city?
Thank you.
It's a difficult. I think there is a question in there somewhere. It's a difficult thing to answer because we have to go back again, and I'm sorry to keep doing this, but to say that we voted for this cut in the budget in January, February. Sorry. What you seem to be saying is we should have looked at this entirely different, and that may be the case, but that should have been in February. It's moved on since then, and we were told, or not me particularly, but the library service were told, you need to make this cut this year, and that is what they're doing. And it may well be that there's this contradiction in what you're saying, but for this purpose of what we're here for today, is just really to look at whether we've followed the process correctly of how we make this saving. Everything else is really a different argument and for a different day. We can't really now, look at different things. Have we as an administration, as a service, a library service, followed the procedure that we should have done to make the saving that we were told we wanted to make way back in February? So, I'd like to be able to answer your question, but I can't in some ways because it's a wider question than what we're dealing with here today and what we've dealt with over the last few weeks.
I would only add that there's some really interesting points raised there around the equalities impact assessment and the intersection and how that affects communities. We are looking at all of those things, and thank you. We will take those points and add them to our committee report. To our cabinet report. In particular, we've been looking at the impact at Jubilee and Hove as those libraries which do have a more diverse user base. But you're right that we do need to look at the smaller libraries as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and Alan, I don't think we wanted to make that cut, as you just said. I think we had to. And these are the nasty.
Either way, whether we wanted to or we had to, it was decided that we would.
Yeah, we had to. So I'm now going to Bridget, who is our last person. Oh no, you're going to? Okay. You want to come back? Okay. I haven't given a break because I thought that I think we'll carry on. So
Bridget's dropped off
Bridget's
the course.
first.
Bridget's dropped off the course.
Oh, right, okay. So can I go to you now? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair. Adam Muirhead here as a community works rep for the voluntary community sector, with a particular focus on children and young people. And first of all, I did want to say thank you, particularly to officers who, when charged with making savings like this, and arguably some of the most invested in library services in the city, this must be really challenging, and thank you for coming, being open to the scrutiny of how that's worked. I had two proposed reductions now as regrettable, particularly from a perspective of investment in children. The figures in the equality impact assessment around book access and ownership for children on free school meals in particular was incredibly saddening. In that context, the proposals do seem potentially harmful to the Council's highly valued education disadvantage strategy. So I would ask that the Cabinet considers this specific strategy in its deliberations to ensure it can mitigate impact on the city's poorest children wherever possible. I also noted with interest that a large number of letters were written and posters made by children from West Dean Primary School. This engagement is really important And capturing these children's voices should be celebrated and validated, particularly in the context of the point that was raised from our Youth Council representative, Jasmine, about small proportion of voices from children and young people. As a proponent of good child and youth participation in the city, I might insist that whatever the result of this process, someone from the council should follow up with those children in particular to explain the final decision and their influence on it in person. Is that something that would be possible? Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, I've written down your points there around the strategy and considering that in reference to our needs and use analysis, and certainly we'll be adding that in. So thank you for raising that. We did look at free school meals, and yeah, they are quite impressive statistics, or worrying statistics, in the way that they are linked. We are looking at prioritising services to areas of most need around the city, and that is one of the things which is being considered in the proposals that we're putting forward and will be presented to Cabinet. That's a really interesting idea about going back to the school and talking to the young people about what their participation meant, and we'll definitely take that as a suggestion and discuss that. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. And now I go to Sue.
Okay, so I've got a recommendation to make. I'm also concerned about the impact on staff, which hasn't been mentioned.
No.
I presume there will be some, redundancies. I know we always try and not, make it, but, we've got staff here. If you work with me at Westing, even if it's only one day a week, that is your library, and therefore, it's a big impact, and also the other people who work there. Like cleaners, as Simon says, presumably they are. I want to propose that we shelve this, that we wait for the library strategy. I know that Alan's been telling us about budgets. I'm quite familiar with budgets. I've been finance both for the opposition. I've been in administration twice. If you look at, for example, the adult social care budget, which is actually probably the adult social care budget will be helped if you keep libraries open. So it's one of the things, but it never, ever achieves its savings. Many of these services never achieve the savings that's set for them. It's great that you're trying to do that. And obviously that's what you expect services to do. So I think you're coming under children's services, which is presumably why Anna's involved in this. So that's a huge budget in the council. This is a very small cut in terms of the council budget. Obviously, to most of us, 200,000 is a lot of money. It's not a lot of money in the context of a council budget. So my proposal is that we have a recommendation to Cabinet that this proposal is shelved for this year, at least while we are undertaking the new library strategy, while we're looking at the impact of PFI, and that we, thank the officers for all the work which will feed into the library strategy, but we don't continue with this recommendation at this time. I think there's loads of concerns, not just from us in opposition, but from members of the majority party. So that's my proposal. I don't know if we can have a vote on that. I need a seconder. Second that. I think Ivan seconded it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, thank you for your indulgence. One of the questions I asked, which I forgot about when you said, is there anything else? Are these spaces going to be mothballed rather than closed permanently? Because I think that might have an impact on how we take this forward. Because if it's like, this is a temporary closure, that might help, but I'm inclined to sort of go along with Sue on her recommendation. But I just wanted you to answer that about the future of these spaces.
Do you mean the physical room that they're in? In terms of the physical room that they're in, that will be going back into property for them to look at. In terms of the service, we will stop providing a statutory library service. As we've said, one of the options that we would like to consider with community groups is whether community groups want to run it as a community book library or community book share or whatever they want to call it. A lot of areas run them already, which means as a council we pull out of running a statutory library service, but it can continue through a community group running it. If a community group doesn't come forward, then yeah, we will remove the books, the shelving, everything from that space, and property will decide what to do with that space. But we will stop, as a local authority, running a statutory library service. That what was put, the savings that were put forward means that's what we will have to do in those 3 libraries, and we will reduce the statutory library service at Jubilee. In terms of mothballing, I guess Jubilee and Hove will always be easier to step back up and increase those hours because we've got 2 libraries there, but the other libraries will have pulled out of those. So we won't have the space and we won't have the books, the shelves, the desks there. So they will go.
Sorry, I mean, I was just, that's very disappointing. I thought that maybe this was a temporary solution, that, we would revisit it in the new strategy to keep those places, to bring them back into use as libraries, as our service. But I think what you just said, Anna, is basically that's not going to happen.
I mean, within the strategy, I was going to say, if somebody comes up and says, here's another £500,000 million towards the libraries, what are you going to do with it? Then obviously the strategy will be looking at how do we spend additional money across the city in libraries. But at the moment, that's not what I think we're anticipating.
And I would just say that if we've had the proposal, we'll need to put the proposal to the financial officers who can tell us the ramifications of that, because I don't know them. I can't sit here and tell you we can do that or we can't do that, and so we need to go away, I think, with that proposal, and before it comes to cabinet, we would need to speak to the financial officers to find out the ramifications of how that would affect everything, and then bring that to cabinet along with what the financial officers tell us. But it's not something that we could just now say, well, yeah, let's do that. Could you put your mic on? I can't hear.
Am I on? I think what I'm proposing is a recommendation that goes to Cabinet. What Cabinet does with that is up to them. They can still pursue, they can still say, no, we don't agree with scrutiny, we think we've got a good plan here and we're going ahead with it. So it's not your decision to make, Alan, at all, is it? It's our decision to make as a scrutiny committee to say, hold on, don't do this now. We propose that this doesn't, that this is shelved for the moment.
And none of this is my decision to make. It will all be made by Cabinet. But what I'm saying is that we take your recommendation, but we would need to know what the ramifications of that are. It would be no good Cabinet saying, oh yes, we'll go with this, and then finding out there's a lot of trouble for it. So we would need to look at what you're saying, take that to financial officers, come back with, which would then go in Keris's report to Cabinet.
Right, Sam, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on what Julie said, and I hear what you said, Anna, but can we make a recommendation that actually these venues are mothballed, if that was the decision, so that actually we don't strip out things like the shelving? I don't understand how that could save money. It's shelving, it will just go on a, dare I say it, to landfill somewhere. Books were already earmarked to go back into the system in other places, so they're not lost. And actually then, if the strategy is forthcoming and that does determine that there are other ways of using these spaces, then actually they're there ready to be reignited or reused if that was possible after the strategy is completed. So actually we're not completely demolishing something, so it's kind of like a hybrid, I guess, between what Sue was saying and picking up on what Julie said.
Yeah, just thinking about that, I suspect it's staff that is quite critical to this in saving money. The actual cost of the libraries themselves, and I don't know what estates would do with those areas.
But if we actually, demolish the structure, then it is a lot more expensive to put it back. But if it was kept, even if it was until the strategy was at least finalised, then we do at least have, that is still then an option.
I think Russell Dean's listed, and I think West Dean's part of the school. So.
No, we're not going to demolish the buildings, but Anna was talking about the shelving and stuff, Julie. Yeah, which is what you were suggesting, I think.
Okay. So let's have a think about those, because I think there was one earlier about it going to full council. Because I think what we're all a little worried about is we're not seeing that final report on the equality either. We don't have all the information in front of us before this goes to full cabinet, and it seems to me, and then there are the ideas about what can be done with those spaces that you're going to put forward, which haven't necessarily come to us in any depth or detail, and which I assume they will to cabinet. So fine. So do you want to, have you got a wording for yours and a seconder? So.
Yeah, I mean, the recommendation was that we would shelve this decision, that we would ask Cabinet not to proceed this decision until, that to consider this as part of the library strategy in 2026.
Sorry.
Just not.
Yeah,
Just
so I think
Charles
is going to help with some work.
Well done.
Councillor Shanks, can I just check, is it your intention to bring an amendment to the report recommendations? Or do you just want the committee to...
It's really saying that the Cabinet...
Sorry?
The recommendations are that this happens, aren't they? So my recommendation is that this doesn't, that Cabinet decides not to proceed with the recommendations to close the libraries. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just trying to work out procedurally whether we need to... Because if it's formal amendments, then what we'll need to do is we'll need to vote on the amendment and then vote on the recommendation of the report. But I think what you're saying is you want the committee to vote on whether it's going to put this forward as a... Yeah. So I'm getting closer with report recommendations. As a suggestion, the committee recommends that Cabinet does, and I think potentially we've got three things.
Well, we've got two different ones, so we can see which one.
Well, doesn't proceed with this and puts it into the whole library strategy. Yes. Am I guessing that's where you want to go? Yeah, if you're going to do a library strategy.
Can I just say that Hollandbury Library are quite keen, the community group at Hollandbury are quite keen that we carry on with this. So, if you're going to suggest this, you may suggest it for Westdean, Rottingdean, I don't know, the Jubilee, but there is one library that is quite keen that we carry on and alter their situation. So I think it would be a little unfair to tell them, no, we're not going to do that now, we're going to stop it.
But they could do it anyway. Okay. So, have we got the wording for that then?
Is that okay then? What was it?
Recommendation is that Cabinet not proceed with this strategy.
With the library closure plan?
The library closure plan, and but you want it into the general library.
Well, it's already going to be. I don't think we need to say that. I think we just need to say that at this time, not to proceed.
At this time, not to proceed.
I mean, the background of that, we've all heard, haven't we, that there's going to be a bigger strategy, that, people aren't happy. I think it's
okay. So we have that recommendation. And it's seconded? Yes. Okay, by Ivan. So, shall we put that to the vote? Just to say that we would not wish them to proceed with this?
Can you just say again so we're all very clear on the vote?
Yeah. Giles, have you taken that down?
The recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee recommends that Cabinet do not proceed with the library closure plan at this time.
Yes.
Very quickly, is this us recommending the Cabinet do not proceed with this as the member?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because this.
Yeah.
Can I ask again? Would this include then Jubilee and Hove, because they're not closing?
all the closures in that.
Jubilee and Hove aren't closing.
No, but that's fine because we're just talking about the closures.
So we're simply talking about the Westdean and Rottingdean closures.
Sorry, no, I wasn't. I was talking about all of the flats, because actually the closures of Jubilee, we've already heard in flats before as well. It is a closure, because it's not going to open in a certain time.
Okay. All the thing. Okay.
And including Hollandbury, who quite
Okay. I think yes. It's for the members of the committee to decide on this. Yes. Okay.
Sorry, members, you'll need to use the mics.
We're just recommending. This is the recommendation that they don't go ahead with this. They don't proceed with this strategy at this time. Yeah?
Yeah.
So, are we going to vote on that now? So, who is for this recommendation? I've got a new countdown.
Thank you.
That's passed unanimously, I believe.
Pardon?
That's unanimous.
Yes, unanimous. Okay. So, do we need the other recommendation from Ellen, which was, I think it was something, well, you say, because, but I don't think we really need it, do we? Yeah, it's taken. Okay, well, thank you, and I'd like to, yes.
Sorry. If Cabinet do decide to go ahead with this, then actually I would like my recommendation, I would like at least to vote on this, that actually the libraries are mothballed and not dismantled.
You need to go through your administration.
Why? I can bring it to recommendation here. Sorry? No, it's just about how we shut them.
You don't want it to happen.
Sorry, so...
Sorry. Charles.
No, you just need to do it on with microphone.
Yeah, microphone, you would just, yes, because it's difficult for some people to hear.
I think that's fair enough, but I mean, you have to wait to see what Cabinet do, really. And you can ask Cabinet not to do what they're doing. But, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to support that if it goes ahead. It just seems a bit weird that we're saying we don't want it to go ahead, and then we're saying if it does. So, yeah.
John?
But we can make a recommendation that is, if that doesn't happen, surely we can make a subsequent recommendation. An alternative. So if there's one, and then you would have a subsequent one, I don't see why that's problematic. Is it?
Advice, John.
They're not mutually exclusive recommendations, so I don't think we're not recommending to impossible things. I don't see why you can't make that a second recommendation.
Yeah, I think we can make that second recommendation, because it gives us two areas. Okay, so do you want to do some wording on that if the Cabinet decides to proceed with the closures, that the 3 libraries are just mothballed?
Yes,
so they
I'd like
can
to
be...
So that with a view to when the strategy is produced, that actually if the strategy finds a way to re-engage with those properties as libraries and others, we can, reuse them very quickly rather than, because I take on board Anna's point, which is that actually otherwise we're ripping out the guts of a library.
Yeah. So if you've got that time. Sorry, by this stage I'm relying on John, because we've been going for a long time.
So I've got, should Cabinet decide to proceed with the planned library closures, the library buildings should be mothballed until the library strategy determines future use of city libraries.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Giles. Thank you. So,
again,
shall we?
Can I come again? This wouldn't work for Hollandbury.
Yeah, but Alan, we're committee members.
We're saying we're going to mothball buildings, and one of the buildings doesn't want to be mothballed. One of the buildings wants to continue.
Alan,
we do know that because they want to continue as a community centre. The library is within the community centre. If you mothball it, do you mothball the whole community centre or what?
Alan, I'm sure something will be sorted out on that. But anyway,
it's a recommendation.
Anyway, this is a recommendation from committee members that we are putting forward, and you are actually part of the cabinet, Alan. So we're going to put this forward as recommendation. So it's a yes, TJ, do you second? Right, okay. So can we all vote on this recommendation to actually ask the cabinet that if they do decide to go ahead with this, that those libraries facing closure are mothballed with a view to then trying to bring them back in with the new library strategy? Yes? So are we all voting? Bernadette? Everybody? Right, you can't vote. At the end?
No. Adam's not voting.
Adam's not voting.
All voting members voted.
So all voting members have voted. So it's unanimous again. Okay. Okay. Well, all I say is thank you so much to Alan and the officers. I think you have dealt incredibly well with all the questions this evening, and excellent responses. Thank you so much. I can see a lot of work's gone into this, and we're very appreciative of that. But I think, yes, feelings are quite strong about the libraries. And I understand, I think the report was excellent, actually, in getting an idea of library provision across the city, who uses it and so on. So I think that was invaluable. I think your equalities impact assessment, the further one, I think we'd all very much like to see that, if that's possible, because all that work is informative for us of actually sort of more than the libraries, actually. It's about our community. But thank you very much anyway, and thank you very much, members, for all your Sorry, I always forget this.
The recommendations in the report to note various things.
Well, I think we have to note various things in the report. Well done for reminding me. Getting carried away with myself. Okay. Yes. No, we're not noting it. No, we're not. You're quite right. So do we do anything with it, Giles?
So you cannot note it, or you could note the report. In your additional recommendations, it means you can't note the report.
Oh, do we agree to note all the to the report and so on, the recommendations?
And then we'll have the two recommendations members agreed will be additional recommendations.
We have made additional recommendations. Yes, we all agree to it. Apologies. Like you, I'm probably, quite keen. But well done, everybody.